I'm too hot. Though.
Wait,
So
here.
can you hold this?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So tell me, guys, something. I'll give you the choice between three questions. You can answer any of them.
Okay.
What is the mind? What is the heart? What is the brain?
Hmm.
Oh, fourth, what is the soul? Oh, we should be having this castle here. What do you guys think?
All right, I'll start with the mind. I feel like that
Okay.
one's the easiest. I'll preface this. I'm a little bit like I like philosophy a little bit, so I
Okay.
might get into this a little deeper than you want. But like
I'm a soft philosopher.
okay,
So.
I love that. I love that. I like kind of like the functional idea of the
Okay.
mind, right? So the mind isn't the brain meat that you have, but it's
Okay.
like the system of neurons that
Yeah.
like contribute to your decision making, and those neurons like could theoretically be in like silicon and a chip, and like you
Yeah.
could upload your mind and it's still the same mind.
Yeah.
Is that mind you? I don't think so. I think that's a separate thing. But
Whoa, wait.
so-
That mind isn't you?
I don't think that mind. So I.
Okay,
I'm
keep
on,
going.
like,
No,
I
go
don't
for
think-
it, go for
it.
I think the mind is one thing, and
Okay.
your identity is a separate thing. And I think
Okay.
your identity is inseparable from your human body. Right?
Okay. So identity corresponds more to the body than
In my opinion, yes.
to those mechanisms of mind that could be put on a chip.
Yes. So like there's the cognitive stuff in your decision making, and you can
So
like,
that's the mind stuff.
and that's the mind. You
Okay.
can put your brain in a vat, and that would all be kind of like the same thing, and you
Okay.
could simulate, right, like without your body. But like, just think about the way your body responds to exercise and physical touch. I think
Sure.
there's so much there that's like we don't understand, like how it's all related, and like think about your gut, like how much your like gut processes, and like there's
Yeah.
all this stuff about like how you have all this intuition in your gut.
Yeah.
Like I think your body is like incredibly important to determining who you are, but like the mind is kind of its own thing and could maybe be isolated, but it wouldn't be you.
I'm
That's my
not
thought.
understanding
Okay.
though how the mind would be a smaller fraction of the self than the body. If all
Ask
the
that question again.
so how the mind, I'm not understanding how the mind could be a smaller fraction of the self than the gut, than your senses, and then the body.
You're saying the mind, that is the mind?
I'm saying
You're
that if
saying,
I
like,
were,
why does the mind make up like a smaller part than like the gut or the other senses?
you
of
seem to
your
be
you're
body?
attributing the
Yeah.
self more to the body, and I would think your beliefs, your personality, your reactions,
yeah.
your judgments, your interpretations would be more the self than your gut
Yeah,
brain.
I think it's more the self. I think the
Okay.
mind like is more important to who you are than your
Okay.
leg.
Okay.
But I think you can't separate them
Got it,
and
yeah.
and say that
Well, it would
that's
be
so
a very
you.
okay. So if we say that the self
Yeah.
is the set of all of what we can call interpretive mechanisms, which includes mechanisms in the gut,
Sure.
which includes the peripheral nervous system, and so all of your senses and all of that, then you chip away a piece of it, and that takes a
There
piece.
you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it would be a different self, or it'd only be a part of the self. Anytime you move anything, or even as we grow, as we change, and as the connections change, and so on, the self changes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that's super. I like that's super, like the Theseus's ship kind of thing, where
I
like
don't know about this.
there's like the idea is there's a ship,
Okay.
and it's like this new ship, and it's Theseus's ship, and then over time, like something breaks. You replace
and then
one
when
part
does
of
it
it.
stop being a
When is
ship
it not
is
the
the
ship?
idea.
And after some period of time, it's a completely new. Every single original part is replaced.
Yeah.
Is it still the ship? Like
So you have to wonder what are the defining pieces.
And I'm not sure. I don't know.
And maybe we couldn't
Yeah.
define that. Maybe we're asking a question that we can't answer. That
Yeah.
okay, very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to add something to? Do you have something you
course.
want to say? Because I have another question. So go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I guess you guys have a way more deeper understanding of the mind than me, but I was just gonna say, like, my mom always like raised me, teaching me that the mind is something like way more powerful than we think it is, and that
Okay.
we like understand about, and like really you can like be a lot more determined and a lot more resilient, and like your mind is way stronger than you think it is. So
Okay.
that'd be my answer. Like I don't really have an answer of what it is,
Hold on,
but
fuck that
whatever it
I want
is.
to lean against this.
No, you're all
So I
good.
can be completely focused on your answer. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I'm not sure what the mind is. That's your question, but all I do know is it's like way stronger and way deeper than all of us think it is. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. I have a question. Where does the personality come from?
I think your personality comes from both the environment that you're grown up in, but also I'm sure some of it is genetic as well.
So
But
what-
but at least for me, like my personality is very, very similar to my sister's. Like it kind of was like monkey see, monkey do. I like, copied exactly how like she acts and she does. She's like the older child, so I don't know where she got it, but at least I just got it from her. So.
Okay, so it's an interplay. So basically, so short answer is that genetics are going to give you an architecture
Yeah.
of brain. and that brain is going to then, respond to the world as it does. And then as it's responding to the world, well, those connections are going to be changing based on what stimuli we encounter and so on. So yeah, okay, very cool. Okay, let me ask you another one because you guys are fantastic. So, and he's got shelter. So, what is intuition? You mentioned intuition earlier.
What is intuition? Yeah, I feel like a lot of the thinking we do.
Let me just make sure I'm recording. That'd be really embarrassing. All right, go ahead.
Good. I think a lot of the thinking we do, we're very aware of that thinking, right? Like we're actively processing. Some people even have it like a narrative in their head, like of English or whatever language. You know what I mean? Of like, yeah. Some people don't. It's more abstract, but you're still like processing. And then a lot of times you're not actively processing, but you kind of reach conclusions, and you can kind of and have these feelings without, and not emotional feelings, but feelings like I'm going to cross the street because I don't feel, you know what I mean? Like
literally
everybody's felt it. Yeah.
Decisions.
Yeah. And I think that's intuition. And I think a lot of that is just kind of like you've been in situations so many times, and you've done that processing already, and it's just ingrained in you, and you don't have to do it again. Yeah.
Have you heard of System 2 and System 1?
No.
Okay, so that's how psychologists sort of break it down into intuition and higher cognitive thinking. Okay. So you have your higher cognitive mechanisms, which are going to be a lot slower and aren't always going to engage.
Yeah.
Your System 1 mechanisms always engage. They're always giving you an answer. And then the question is, do you take the time to let the System 2 voices or the System 2 mechanisms sort of engage with the material, because then they'll come up with a better answer. Okay. All right, let me try one thing.
Yeah.
All right. So because I've actually, in none of my interviews have I mean, I've probably only done a dozen, but have I thought that maybe I could talk about this. Okay. So you're honored. Are you blushing?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Very honored.
Okay. All right. So okay. So I studied neuroscience since I was a kid. I've been reading that since I was a kid, and I was really interested in cognitive biases. So all of these different sort of shortcuts that we take, biases, heuristics are shortcuts, biases. And we're not talking about biases and, I like that person, therefore I agree with everything they say. We're talking about biases in the in-group, out-group bias, which is if I see a member of my own group, automatically afford that person a little more leniency, a little more understanding. If I see a member of the other group, automatically I'm a little untrusting of that person. And if they step out of line, I'm going to be ready to correct it. So I was really interested in all that, and I came up with a model of the mind where you have the self, which I called the ego using Freud's terms, and then you had sort of in the id, you had these cognitive biases. And so I was thinking about the interaction between the self and these biases. And you mentioned sometimes you're actively thinking and so on. And so I was thinking about the relationship between that actively thinking part and then the automatic, less reliable stuff. Okay. And the idea is that you recognize you've committed a bias or you've, whatever, and then you make the correction, you being the higher thinking thing. And the more that I thought about it, the more that I realized that this higher thinking thing kind of doesn't exist. There are more nuanced mechanisms, there are more complicated mechanisms, but there is no like reasonable soul that exists in there that corrects every time there's an alarm that goes off because of a cognitive bias. That's just like connected to truth and just like knows better, but sometimes we just don't turn it on. You know what I mean? Yes. And so anyways, I call this the ego myth. It's a myth that there is, or the judge myth. It's a myth that there's this sort of central, reasonable, aware entity inside of us that is able to sort of catch our mistakes and is able to like be reasonable. Like, okay, now I'm going to correctly interpret the evidence or whatever, you know? So anyway,
then what do you think like is the reasoning for correcting it then when people do?
How does that? So that would be. So basically, it's another instinct.
Just more. Okay.
So your brain, yourself, it's a competition between what you can call them instincts, biases, heuristics, mechanisms. I call them voices, sometimes whatever. But it's a competition between those. So when, for instance, if let's see, what would be a good example? If you are looking at applications and you see, I don't know, Jamal, I don't know, some really, Devon, I don't know, Dyrone, I don't know, whatever. And you see that is going to activate your
like implicit bias.
100%. Now, what can happen is either you take that out of your hand, so you remove all names from the application. That's one thing for where the system can sort of compensate for it. Otherwise, what might happen is if there's another mechanism that's like anti-racist in your brain, then what that's going to do is say, oh, Devante? No, I want him. So then there's going to be a little competition between the one that's saying, oh, out-group, and the one that's saying, oh, no, we love out-group. It's going to be a little competition that's going to produce a behavior. And so it's all these different, so basically the trick would be, if we can learn the sort of cognitive biases that have already been identified, that the brain already does, you know, and there are several hundred that have already been identified. If we learn those, then when we come to a conclusion, we can go, that might be this shortcut that I took. You won't know, because there's no tagging process in the brain. The brain doesn't know what it's doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You like that?
I like that thought a lot. And I think it's like, I feel like we're so taught that like our rationale, like I feel like especially in the West, like our rationality is king, and like that's how we get through the world. And
but it's a myth. There's no rationality. There is a biological system cannot just like at least not so far, have just evolved the ability to correctly assign all the right weights to all the different properties that it observes for any question, and that's just not.
And I think it's really dangerous to think that a lot of times, like I think this is like when you have these like thoughts that are often like, I think everybody like will have these negative thoughts.
Yes.
And we point to these thoughts, and it's like intelligence. This is the thing that's telling me to not to hold back, to have these fears about growing, expanding, like being vulnerable. Everybody has these fears and these voices saying like, and I think those are like under the guise of like, this is my intelligence telling me to do that.
We totally misattribute a lot of our instincts. Yeah. Sometimes we say, oh, that's a good instinct, and then we like follow it, and it wasn't. Or sometimes, and sometimes we think, oh, this is the reasonable part of me that's now acting. Yeah. This is the absolutely awesome. Okay, all right, I'll just leave you with this then. And also, let me give you my cover before I forget.
Oh yeah, of course.
So, all right. So here are based on this thinking that I've done. Here are the two, based on how the brain works. Here are two ways. If you have, first of all, humility, and that's why when I heard you guys talk about modesty, I got very excited, a little chubby. And so one of the great things to be able to do is if you have the humility to say that what I am thinking might just be a human brain produce this thing, and it does not make it true. You have the humility to do that. And you identify certain mechanisms as not useful. So for instance, I don't know, if you're self-conscious and you keep wondering, oh, were they talking about me? And then you keep following up and asking, you know, and finding out, don't do it. So so there's two principles: no heed, no need. So if you don't heed the instinct in the brain will learn, oh, I'm not needed. Okay, that's just basic fire together, wire together, and then the more that they fire, the more these connections are reinforced. And then the other one is refute to mute. Because there's this competition between these mechanisms in the brain, there is a mechanism of you that might be saying the right thing and another mechanism that might be saying the wrong thing. By confronting the evidence, literally saying it out loud, looking at it, not just knowing it, but literally refuting the other mechanism inside of you, saying, no, stop thinking that. That is not true. Here is the evidence. Then that will slowly over time mute that.
Yeah.
All right. Very good.
I love that.
I love those rhymes. That's
awesome.
Very clever. Yeah.
So pleased to have met you guys. All right. I'm Eris.
Yeah.
Leo.
Nolan.
Nice
to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks
for chasing us down.
Yeah. Thank
my
you so
dog
much.
is Neo. So
oh, very cute. Very cute. Okay, I may pet her on the way out. Yeah.
All right. Come on. Come meet the dog.